Do you understand your bird's unique dietary preferences and requirements? Easily, we can understand that many of us humans have unique dietary preferences, as well as requirements. Some people seem to be lucky enough to be able to consume just about anything without any adverse effects at all. Others may have severe allergies. Still others may need to watch their overall carbohydrate intake, while others have to watch their fat intake. It's really not any different with our pets, especially when it comes to exotic birds who are not completely domesticated yet. Just like people whose origins may come from parts of the world where more grains are consumed, or more plant matter is consumed, or more pasta. Our birds all originate from regions where certain foods naturally grow or otherwise are indigenous to the region. Even within those regions, just like with human culture, certain foods can be found and preferred to be eaten in one microregion versus another. Should we be surprised then that one species of parrot prefers and requires certain kinds of foods over others? Of course not. Hence, as responsible caregivers of our birds, we all really need to look deeper into not only where our species of bird originates from, but also the microregion that particular species spends most of its time. To give a very brief example, using the most popular exotic birds that live in our homes, let's use macaws, eclecti, African greys, cockatoos, and cockatiels as our prime examples. Macaws live way up in the upper canopy of the forest. Rarely are they witnessed foraging on the ground, except when they visit their clay licks. Right off, this tells us they will be consuming more fruit, seed, and pits within that fruit, nuts, tender tree leaves. Have you ever noticed your bird prefers tender greens over tough greens? We may be surprised to find all parrots consuming moss, lichen, and mushrooms, as all of these readily grow in the forests. They will also consume young and tender bark. The higher up the tree, the more tender the bark. Lots of flying and crawling insects. Yes, of course, they do occasionally wander down to the forest floor for snails and mollusks, but not much more. For this reason, we should all understand that foods that grow on the forest floor are not going to be among the top foods macaws will consume. It's just common sense. Foods like legumes, grains, and ground-growing veggies would not be among the foods macaws would prefer to consume or require to thrive, but they will consume these foods in times of lack of other foods. In other words, only in necessity. Eclecti, among many other species, spends most of their time in the mid-canopy of the forest. Again, it is safe to assume that species who spend most of their time in the mid-canopy will also consume a large amount of fruit, seeds, and small pits within that fruit, tender leaves, young tender bark, and lots of flying and crawling insects. Species like African greys tend to spend most of their time in the mid-canopy, but they spend more time foraging on the ground than eclecti and other fruit-loving species. It stands to reason that African greys are going to consume more seeds, legumes, and some tubers than birds who spend most of their time in the upper or mid-canopy of the forest. When African greys forage on the forest floor, they spend a lot of their time at riverbanks where they can find snails and mollusks. Finally, our last examples are cockatoos and cockatiels. These species spend quite a bit of time on the forest floor, even though they also like the mid-canopy. It makes total sense that cockatoos will be consuming not only tropical fruit from the mid-canopy, but also more seed, grains, and legumes, as well as tubers. It's not uncommon to see cockatoos consuming a small amount of veggie-like fruit as well. Cockatiels, the smallest of the cockatoo species, consume even a higher amount of seed, grains, and legumes. Cockatiels also like veggie-like fruits, such as foods we consider veggies, but botanically classified because they have the seed inside, they are actually fruit. Again, we will see these two species consuming crawlies and some flying insects from which to obtain their animal protein. We must remember, no matter what species we are feeding, if they are living in the wild, all of the food they consumed would be living raw foods, never cooked in any way. It's not uncommon to witness any species consuming their own eggs or eggs of another species. In the wild, they have the gut flora to handle raw eggs, plus the bloom of the eggs are not removed by washing. The bloom is a sheer covering eggs have when they are laid. Humans normally wash their eggs, thus removing the bloom. As long as the bloom is left on eggs, the bacteria is kept out and doesn't seep through the shell of the egg into the actual egg itself. Nature knows best when it comes to feeding her creatures. Exotic birds are no different. The tropical fruit available in the forest for exotic birds are higher in the amino acid lysine and lower in arginine. Tropical fruit contains more omega-3s than domestic fruit. It also contains less fructose. This is not because of human engineering. This is because nature planned it that way. All of us need to take a deeper look into what foods nature provides for each species in the wild. Those foods are best suited to our pets, even if our pet is fully domesticated, such as dogs and cats. The food animals consume in the wild is raw, never cooked. Raw food, and this can be gently dehydrated food, contains the original and naturally occurring digestive enzymes, unaltered proteins, and unaltered carbohydrates, along with just the right kinds of dairy fat, dietary fats, in the ratio each species needs to thrive. To expect our pets to eat like us is not only incorrect thinking, it is, in my opinion, cruel. Requiring our pets to consume foods we eat, prepared the way we prepare them for us, is called forced evolution. And this is partly what humans do to animals to force domestication upon them. Forced domestication is a cruel, unusual, and unnatural process. This is why we see so many animals die at early ages as the domestication process for a particular species ensues. Soon, we see any given species begin to morph into mutated species nature never intended. Thousands of years later, we pat ourselves on our backs that we have fully domesticated any certain species. Unfortunately, our forced domestication was at the expense of the overall species. Let's all get on board to be the protectors of nature's original and pure species. Let's understand that to keep bloodlines pure and exotic birds thriving, we must follow nature's lead in overall total care, which includes what we feed to our beloved birds. Happy foraging!